Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Chaplain Squadron Leader Robin Kidd. At the outbreak of the Second World War, the British government did not have the resources to maintain the Royal Air Force for the impending air war in Europe. While factories could increase the production of aircraft, there were no such way to supply trained aircrew. A plan was proposed for the Dominions to establish a pool of trained aircrew to serve with the RAF. The proposal was accepted by the Australian War Cabinet, and several weeks of negotiations in Canada, an agreement was signed on the 17th of December 1939. The scheme was known in Australia as the Empire Air Training Scheme. Under the Empire Air Training Scheme, Australia would provide about 28,000 aircrew over 3 years, a third of the total number of aircrew. Australia would conduct its own elementary training, while advanced training would be conducted in Canada because of its closeness to the British aircraft factories and the war zone. Royal Australian Air Force schools were established across Australia to support the Empire Air Training Scheme. While it was initially proposed that each country's aircrew would serve in distinct national squadrons, the bulk of Australian aircrew served with RAF squadrons. There were eventually 17 RAAF squadrons by the time the scheme effectively ended in October 1944. By this time, over 37,000 Australian airmen had been trained as part of the scheme. Today, we remember the formation of the Empire Air Training Scheme. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome the family of Flying Officer Geoffrey Charles Bucknell, whose story will be told shortly. We also warmly welcome the representatives from the Defence Force Chaplains College, who are also attending this evening's ceremony. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Victoria, Portland North Primary School, and from Queensland, Grand Avenue State School, Forest Lake. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Party, attention! Platform party, present arms!
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is birth by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every state advance Australia fair. Enjoy the strains and let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Platform party, shoulder, arms! Platform party, order, arms!
Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flying Officer Geoffrey Charles Bucknell. Geoffrey Bucknell was born on the 9th of May 1911 at the family property Newstead North in Inverell, New South Wales. The son of Norman and Ruby Bucknell, he attended the Shaw School and went on to work as a grazier on the family property. On the 14th of May 1936, Geoffrey Bucknell married Joan Black. 2 children were born to the couple, Anne and Peter. Bucknell paraded part-time with the 12th Light Horse Regiment, reaching the rank of sergeant. During the Second World War, on the 31st of January 1942, he enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force. After initial training, he trained as a pilot at bases in Narromine, Bundaberg, Bradfield Park and Ascot Vale. In early March 1943, he embarked from Melbourne on the Nieuwe Amsterdam, bound for overseas service. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, Bucknell was one of almost 27,500 Royal Australian Air Force pilots, navigators, wireless operators, gunners and engineers who throughout the course of the war trained in anticipation of joining Royal Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. After landing in San Francisco, Bucknell travelled with comrades to the east coast of America, visiting New York before leaving on the retired British ocean liner Queen Mary. Landing in Liverpool, Bucknell then travelled by train to Bournemouth. By late August, he had joined an operational training unit based at RAF Wimeswold in Leicestershire, where he trained with the night bomber crews. After being promoted to pilot officer on the 7th of February 1944 in mid-March, he was posted to 50 Squadron, RAF. In early May, the Glen Innes Examiner reported news from Bucknell which related that he participated in several flying visits to Germany and sent on his message that our crew of 7 now quite consider themselves old hands, and believe it or not, we quite enjoy the operations. Towards the end of May, Bucknell transferred to 97 Squadron, based at RAF Waddington, which was flying 4-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bombers against German targets. On the 6th of August 1944, Bucknell was the pilot of a Lancaster that was part of a mission to bomb a V-1 rocket fuel depot in northern France. As Bucknell's bomber finished its mission, it was hit by German flak. A few minutes later, the petrol tanks exploded. A later account related, Geoff had a gash in his forehead and was slumped over the controls. The bomb aimer and engineer opened the escape hatch and could easily have bailed out, but they were flung into the nose of the plane. The plane fell like a stone afterwards, developing into a spin and disintegrating. Geoff was obviously unconscious and possibly killed outright. The Lancaster crashed close to the intersection of villages, destroying part of one house and causing damage to its neighbour. Lieutenant Rodney James had managed to escape the aircraft, opening his parachute and landing nearby. James was taken care of by a local resident whose family helped to hide him from German soldiers, eventually taking him to Paris. James managed to reach London and rejoin his squadron and report what had happened. The other crew members were not so lucky. Flying Sergeant Ronald McAllister, Flying Sergeant Leslie B. Daetz, Flying Sergeant Leonard Barlow, Sergeant Clifford Dyke, Sergeant William Patience, Sergeant Leslie Farmer, and Flying Officer Geoffrey Charles Bucknell, who was 33 years old, died as a result of the crash. The crew were buried in the nearby Clichy Cemetery, where Geoffrey Bucknell's remains lie today, under the inscription, "Always in our memory." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died whilst serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flying Officer Geoffrey Charles Bucknell, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Catapult party, present, arms. Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party, in words, first. Catapult party, we march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys and students, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.